be standing up, looking 90 degrees to their right from where the service is being held, and they might see my hat go by the bottom of the window. So essentially I'm invisible. And so, you know, Val Bourdon, when I asked him, you know, can I be seen, you know, inside the church, said yes. You know, and I said, well, how? You know, because to me, I couldn't be seen. And what he said, oh, people are staring at you through the lobby windows. What he means is this. This is sort of a, you know, a big window in the entrance area to the church. You know, this is where people go in and enter. And it's true that some people do actually stare at me out this window, so they can see my protest, you know, when I pass in front of church, if they're looking through that particular window. So my next question to Mr. Val Bourdon was, do you celebrate church services in the lobby? Because this is all about disrupting an order, the order and solemnity of church services. You know? And so Val Bourdon came out with this long, drawn-out no, because he realized that he was kind of screwed. And then I asked, has a church service ever actually been disrupted? And both Val Bourdon and Jeremy Searle both came up with answers essentially saying, oh, well, I feel terribly uncomfortable inside knowing you're out there protesting while I'm inside the church, and na. So it was all about their own personal internal emotions. It was not about any disruption of the actual church service. And I made that point, which, by the way, you're not supposed to do. You know, when you're acting in your own defense as your own lawyer, you can cross-examine the witnesses by asking them questions, but you're not supposed to make statements. So I made the mistake of pointing out in a statement that you know, that this law was not about personal feelings and emotions. It was about whether or not church services had actually been disrupted or not. So the judge corrected me, basically told me you can't do that, and, you know, basically just keep asking questions kind of thing. So my next question was, well, has a church service ever started and, I mean, stopped and started again as a result of my protest outside the church? You know, in other words, you know, has at any time there been any interruption of a church service as a direct result of my protest outside the church? And both Val Bourdon and Jeremy Searle were forced to acknowledge that that never happened. So in other words, you know, I was, you know, charged and tried for disrupting the order and solemnity of church services at the Unitarian Church in Montreal, even though no service had ever actually been disrupted as a result of my protest outside the church. So this was, you know, sloppy legal work on the part of the police and Crown prosecutors, to say the least. Thankfully, I had a very good judge who guided me through the process of representing myself. He reprimanded me once or twice when I made mistakes like the one I just mentioned, but he was generally a very good judge. He was respectful of my rights, and I was able to quite easily, successfully defend myself and ultimately be acquitted. So that's just one example of how Unitarian Universalists misuse the Canadian Criminal Code to try and hide the truth. Because my protest is very, very solidly founded on the truth about Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, etc. So we're coming up towards the end of another half-hour segment of video. I think there's about 8 minutes of video left. So I think I will continue the protest for the next 8 minutes, but I may wrap it up. It's pretty quiet today. Not a whole lot of people went into the church. I do have other things I can do today. So I think I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon. I might continue a little bit longer if it looks like something interesting might happen. But I think I am going to call it a day soon. some people reading the chalk slogans. It's good for me. Not so good for the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the larger Unitarian Universalist religious community. Oh, I should mention, I did mention earlier that I have in the past offered to suspend my protest for 2 months and even 3 months if the Unitarian Church of Montreal agreed to enter into dialogue with me towards the end of resolving the conflict, you know, in a manner that actually lived up to the claimed principles and purposes of Unitarian Universalism, especially the second principle, which calls for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the fourth principle, which calls for free and responsible search for truth and meaning, with the key word there being responsible. Montreal Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists more generally have been incredibly irresponsible when it comes to searching for the truth. They've been totally negligent and willfully ignorant and wallowing in psychological denial and so on, really, when they're not outright lying and misrepresenting the truth in various ways. Anyhow, I just wanted to mention that I actually, in the middle of June, I made pretty much the same offer to the new president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So instead of making the offer to, you know, Montreal Unitarians locally, which I haven't done in a while, I offered a 2-month suspension of my protest to Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, the new president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, if she agreed to, you know, enter into dialogue with me. And I don't necessarily mean her personally, but if she agreed that the UUA representatives of the Unitarian Universalist Association would engage in dialogue with me towards the end of resolving this conflict, which the UUA has a major role in, and she never responded to that offer. So I've been protesting through July, through August, through September. I might have missed 1 or 2 Sundays when I had something better to do, but I've been pretty steadfast in my protest, and it has not been suspended in any way because Reverend Susan Frederick Gray refused to accept my offer of suspending the protest for 2 months, if not 3 months, because essentially my offer goes like this. It's like I will suspend the protest for a minimum of 2 months, but that can be extended as long as the discussion's going well. So it could be a very long suspension, and it could be a permanent end, you know, as long as the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Church of Montreal, you know, satisfactorily respond to, you know, what I'm protesting against. But no, they apparently can't bring themselves to deal with certain truths. They can't bring themselves to admit that they've seriously, you know, done some incredibly foolish things, some things that are clearly and unequivocally immoral and unethical and borderline criminal, and in some cases actually criminal. They just can't bring themselves to acknowledge that they have made a total mockery of pretty much everything Unitarian Universalism claims to stand for in their behavior towards me, in their rather inhuman human relations with me, to use a term they like to use, human relations. So that's it. Protest continues, and I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to make that offer again. I'm so close to celebrating the 20th anniversary of protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal that I may not actually make that offer again. That might have been the last time I offered it. I haven't decided yet, because I might just protest right through until the beginning of May of next year, or let's say beginning of June, because that's when it was absolutely certain my protest started. My protest started, I can't remember exactly when, but it was certainly started in May of 1998, possibly started in mid to late April of 1998, but definitely I was protesting in May of 1998. And then in early June of 1998, there was an article about my protest in the Montreal Mirror alternative weekly newspaper. So it definitely was ongoing in June of 1998. So, 2018, beginning of June, or even sometime in May, that will be the 20th anniversary in there somewhere of the beginning of this protest outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. So I will be marking that one way or another. But it just shows, we're talking about willful ignorance and psychological denial. Well, we're talking about 20 years worth, 2 decades worth of willful ignorance and psychological denial on the part of Montreal Unitarians and the Unitarian Universalist Association. So in fact it's more than that. My protest only began after quite a number of letters were ignored or rejected and so on. The issues really began in 1995, 1996, but it basically was a couple of years, even 3 years, well, all of 1996, all of 1997, yeah, so yeah, two full years of letter writing and so on before I actually decided that protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal was about the only option left open to me. So that's it. We're just wrapping up this half-hour segment, and I think we are going to probably wrap it up and call it a day. But maybe not. We might come back. And yeah, so let's do it one last time. Oh, actually, this is one of the things I like is their sign that says "Live in Harmony." They're not trying very hard to live in harmony with yours truly, are they? So we'll just go out on that note. Live in harmony, but brazenly lie, cover up sexual abuse and so on. Yeah, that's how you live in harmony with me.